If you're not doing something that enables a business problem to be solved and or to be grown as a company, meaning revenue, the technology is not worth it. Don't even have the discussion.
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Mike Clifton. Mike's the co-chief executive officer of Alorica, a global customer experience leader with more than 90,000 employees and nearly $2.5 billion in annual revenue. He became co-CEO along with Max Schwedner on May 2nd of 2024. Prior to that role, Mike was Alorica's chief growth and transformation officer for nearly a year and a half, and he joined Alorica in November of 2021 as the company's chief information and digital officer. He's been a CIO or CTO at companies like Cognizant, where he led technology transformation, strategy, and innovation as well. The Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston, where he led operations in addition to the CIO role, and at the Hanover Insurance Group. I look forward to hearing more about his past experiences and how they've culminated in his taking on the co-CEO role at Alorica, the role tech and digital are playing at the company, his view into innovation in the customer experience space, and more. Mike, welcome back to Technovation. Great to speak with you today.
Thank you, Peter. Really appreciate having me back again. It's
No,
fantastic.
it's a pleasure. It's a real pleasure, especially in light of this promotion of yours. Congratulations on achieving the CEO title
Yeah,
at a great company
yeah.
like Alorica.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, I'm sure you might not get a lot of technologists, CIOs that jump into being co-CEOs of business process or business companies. So I'm sure it'll be a great kind of conversation.
I'm looking forward to it for that, among other reasons. Well, let's
Yeah.
begin for those who might be less familiar with it, with an overview from you on Alorica's business. When we start there?
So Alorica is a global company. We've got centers, most of the mainland and regions of Philippines. A lot in EMEA, a significant amount of traction in Latin America. U.S. is obviously a genesis of the business 25 years ago. We are now on our 25th birthday, so it's a celebratory year for us. And in Canada. So we've grown quite a bit. Our core focus as a company is obviously you started it with CX. We are a customer experience company and all things customer experience, whether that's taking a transaction or discussion with a end client of our clients in rev gen or things like sales, all the way from companies, the largest ones in the world, selling very technical products to financial instruments to fulfilling a subscription order or food service delivery. So we've got a varying degree of number of customers that do that. We bridge those two things from a customer experience into technology quite a bit in terms of how we deliver that service in the world-class way that we do it. And that can span from just the experience and how to handle clients in multi-channel ways, all the way up to how do we think about deflecting those calls and interacting with sales order systems and fulfilling sales enablement for clients. So we've got a spectrum that we move forward to. We are not a core back office BPO. We spend our time in the middle and in the front. So we distinguish ourselves by being world class with the people we've got, being able to handle high complex transactions by having that interaction with those clients be both technically assisted as well as human led.
There aren't a lot of companies that have the co-CEO model. There are some major ones that have, like Google and Netflix come to mind, but the vast majority of companies at your scale especially have a single chief executive officer. What's your role entail, and how is it different from the role with the same title that Max Schwendner has?
I think we get stuck in models quite a bit, and models tend to breed consistency. And I actually think now is the time in the industry where you break consistency. And so we decided to break it and follow a couple of the early leaders. And I think you're going to see more of this trail behind us. In our space, it's highly complex. It's also going through a massive transformation. Being able to attack that in multi-dimensional ways is hard for a single person. Usually you're hiring a strategist, and that strategist is laying that vision, and then underneath them are folks that enable that outcome. What we decided to do was put literally two big brains. Mine's a little bit larger than Max's, but in reality, just from a size level of my head, but two big brains in one box and say, look, we're going to focus on speed and efficiency, decision making. We are both somewhat data driven individuals. So we like to look at trends and themes and patterns and then use that to kind of form our hypothesis of things and then disprove it, which everybody tries to do for us. But that helps us with that speed and efficiency. It also allows us to, at a pivot point of our industry today, Certainly, we're under the threat of AI will take over the world as most either conversational or machine driven AI, and that itself creates opportunities. So if done right with the right kind of thinking, you pivot out of this with a much more aggressive, value based company. And I think that's where we're putting our energies toward. And two of us doing that in either in an organic or inorganic way is really helpful. So I think that's the real genesis of I think the changes we've gone through in the last month. We're excited about it, but I would tell you, we have this joke that our wives basically when the phone rings, they realize that it's the other person, myself calling Max or Max calling me, and they walk away quickly and say, "I'll see you tomorrow." So you have to be symbiotic in the thought process in order to make it work. And regardless of the choice of this model, you do have to find two complementary people. To your last point, we don't divide. One mistake would be to divide up the leadership team and have two separate focuses where we just have our own domain dominance be the thing we focus on. I actually think our best ideation comes from when I might be looking at a situation through a lens that I'd look at it in my way and Max through another one, whether that's me in a financial instrument or an operations view or Max in a technology or a digital pivot view. I think that together is what the velocity of the speed of velocity helps quite a bit, and we do that. So it's I like to say he likes to play devil advocate on all my decisions, and I like to play devil's advocate on all his. But it works in a much more symbiotic way than that. But it's a great outcome.
Fascinating, really interesting. And I love the way you describe what you bring to the table based on your past experiences. In fact, I'd love to delve further into it. As I mentioned in the intro, you've been a tech and digital leader multiple times over at large organizations. You've also run P&Ls. You've had a lot of customer touch points. You've been a consultant to major companies. You've had strategy, operations, transformation roles. I wonder, how has this diversity of experience played into your being able to take on the role you have now? You have a quite a toolkit that you can leverage depending upon the issue of the day or the opportunity you're hoping to define.
I get asked this a lot. I think I said it when we talked last. I think I'm one of those guys that has career ADD because I sort of bounce around between all these very skill needed jobs that are very different. But I enjoy all of it, so it's hard for me. But through the luck, and I'll call it that, or actually just through sure risk taking, I think, without even realize I was taking risk, I was jumping from certain paths of building skill into other paths, and I think what I got afforded through other great leaders I work for, quite frankly, I got afforded the opportunity to kind of blend over the line that most people don't like to blend over, which is I was always technology at its core, but then how do I best place to sell it? Where's the business objective that technology can enable? Then there was how is this market different in technical markets? How do I understand those and how to shape a technology solution to solve what the market need was? Then in marketing or in business operations. So I've always had this sort of desire to take tech as the enabler, not make tech my job. And that's helped with getting into markets and sales and operations where you're always enabling someone to achieve something. But you do have to be a little bit of a a little bit of a risk taker, knowing that your skill set might not be as peak when you jump into a situation like you're now in sales and you've got to make a quota and an engine work, or you're in sales management and you've got to lead a lot of people to the top of that hill and you need to figure the strategy out pretty quickly. I think I said in the beginning, I think I've been afforded the luxury and maybe I earned the right when I got there, but on the way in, they probably were like, this is going to be an interesting experiment. But it worked out in both our favors. But I think it's what makes a well-rounded co-CEO. I think Max still does better things than I do, and I still do things better in some cases than Max does. We know that, but we also are like, that's interesting. Didn't think about it like that. Someone asked me another question, Peter, that was kind of akin to it is, how could I follow that path? And I'm thinking, well, you ever play pinball? And they said, yeah. I said, that's me moving around the pinball machine. I said, I'm not sure that's the path I'd take. There's probably a straighter line somewhere to the success, but I'm sure I wouldn't do that. But to me, it's be bold and take risks and try some new things. And if realize where your gaps are, I think realize where your blind spots are, and then don't try to fill them. Go focus on other places.
And how, where you have are on opposite sides of an issue, How do you what's the tiebreaker? How do you determine which way to go?
It's funny. We were having this debate when we were asked to consider the future in a very short amount of time. Max and I had this debate about, so if we were to do this as sort of duality, what's our sort of unpublished rules, or I always liken it to, what's the marriage contract look like? Who's got the ultimate decision? And like any good husband and wife, that's usually something that's not visible to the rest of the organization or family, but those debates happen. I think we play to each other's strengths when the tie needs to be brought, and it comes down to gut feel with longer duration of domain knowledge in that area, where that's likely the answer in the tiebreaker. We often, I'll just tell you, in the last 2 years working with Max, there hasn't been, I think, more than one time where we might have been at the opposite side of the answer. And it was really because we didn't have enough data, and that was frustrating to us. But 99.9% of the time, if what we get is the data, we probably arrive very closely to the same outcome pretty rapidly. So we've been fortunate in that area. Like I said, it has to be a bit of symbiotic nature, thinking the same, but pushing hard. So I think I love to say I make 51% of most of the decisions, but that's okay.
You've already alluded to the fact that customer experience generally, and Alorica specifically, have been profoundly impacted by advances in AI and generative artificial intelligence. I wonder what excites you about the AI you've already implemented, and what excites you as you look to the near future as to what's ahead.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head as to why I think we have a change in Alorica, but also what's made it really exciting for Max and I, and pretty much the entire leadership team of our company now. You can read and or absorb all this material about AI and the things that are happening with really great technology. Machines are learning. They have been for a while, where they're automating or rules processing or learning by itself. But generative AI caused a conversation to happen that never happened, and now it's becoming smarter a lot faster than people grow up. It's leaping 7, 10, 15 years in a year, if not more, and that's amazing. So to us, that's a massive opportunity for our industry, and we're uniquely kind of positioned in that industry because we're not too big, we're not a public entity, we're not small, so we have a bit of nimble, and we've got great capacity and financial instruments to put to work, where we can put our best brains around this accelerated strategy to kind of go after the market and make the market. Like I said, we're not governed by an overweight portfolio of sites. We're not governed by a massive amount of employees with idle capacity. We are an engine that's very tuned, and our clients that we work with have long-standing relationships. It's great. So it affords us an opportunity to be a bit of a skill builder with them. We look at technologies. If you look at our core, it's CX. You then wrapper that core with next generation platforms, whether they're in the next cloud delivered Genesis platform, or CCIA at Google's level, or Microsoft enabled platform with Dynamics. Those are easy core level instruments that we can get one level of higher thinking. But then you wrapper that with the next gen AI around tools such as coaching tools, thematic analytics around the way voice and dialect go, to voice translation, which allows us to be a very big differentiator in industry. You're speaking 72 languages on one end of the phone, and on the other, you're hearing a single unified language in the same dialect, tonal, and fluctuation that you expect to be on a real call in real time. That's a game changer, right? That instrument there puts this world of AI in kind of a very real way. I would say technology is an answer. The problem you're trying to solve is the business reason. So most people are still chasing a lot of areas where language portfolios and countries are the answer. We're looking at tech augmentation and a skill set issue, not skill set being the domain skill set needed for the vertical business transaction, like BFI banking or retail. So I think that's going to have a big impact on our industry. And where Max and I are going to go is to apply the principles of using that to tomorrow's Alorica, and do it in a very aggressive way. And almost set the tone where keeping up is going to be hard to do. And our expectation is giving our nimbleness and our ability with what we've got for a backing to get there faster than any other company. And the last piece I'd say it's disruptive in the sense that I always look at because I've been in technology for a while, as you alluded, for quite a while. You got these waves, right? Whether you had a wave of digitization, or way back you had Y2K, and then you just kind of kept following the same wave to digitization. Then digital took over, and the impacts to retail, and now AI is taken over, and whether it's generative or machine or neural, all of it's got the benefit of helping foster tighter relationships. What was easier transactions, sure, they're going to go away. But when I look at our portfolio of business, the depth of our transactions are very complex. They're not a single system or duality. It's a multi-system transaction with a client, and usually it's because they need a human in the loop. The reality is, how do we enable that to be assistive and make it that much smarter? And I believe that means we do that much more transactions today they wouldn't put in our portfolio. So the aperture widens, it doesn't narrow. I think that's the goal, and we're going after it pretty aggressively, which I think is, to your point about the skill we've got. That's where Max and I, in a fine tuning fork, can kind of be applied.
Yeah, really interesting. And you're kind of alluding to something I wanted to talk to you about as well. And that is, there are a lot of people that fear a job loss as a result of advances in artificial intelligence. And I know you've got some nuanced perspectives, as you're beginning to allude to at the end of your response there, on that idea as it applies to Alorica, and the extent to which you wish to pontificate, more broadly speaking, about this being aperture expanding as opposed to narrowing, and therefore like having the more profound and near term implications perhaps that some fear. Can you delve in a little bit further to what you've already begun to allude to?
Absolutely, and we get this a lot from Max and I just finished one half of the world tour, and we gone to the Philippines and visited five of our sites there across the Philippines. And in India, we visited our sites there, then out to Europe and visited sites there. We're back in the U.S., hitting Latin America and then the U.S. sites next. And what we were looking for is we started this listening tour. And it was really not for us. We've been around for a couple of years, so people know us. But in reality, it was a little bit, tell us what's going on in your heads as our employees. And we listened to calls. We talked to our agents quite a bit, did town halls. And the number one question that I seem to get, there's never really one Max gets, but I get it, is AI is going to hurt our industry. What do you think about it? And I was at a bankers conference this past few days in New York, and a lot of our peer CEOs were there, and they got the same question from analysts. And it's an interesting answer, right? Because it's all about where you come from in terms of how your company is organized and how your footprint looks to how you might answer that question. And whether you're private or public has another impact to that. But the reality is, yes, if you're today a company that's taking order fulfillment questions or answers, then the mobile phone took that away a while ago. So if you were calling for your bank balance, I'm pretty sure your mobile phone took it away, or your texting capability took it away. So that creating fear in people never happened. What happened though was there was an expectation that those people who were answering or doing those transactions now had to do a different set of transactions. So the reality of what opens the aperture, as I refer to it, is the humans are the most intelligent piece, an emote piece of that equation. When they're the easiest answer to solving another human's problem, because that emotion is what people want in talking to a person. They want sympathy that that's happened. We always will have a human in the loop in our equation. Assistive technologies, that may take a lot of what that question would be out of the way, so that the last piece of that can be the shortest transaction. But I have this concept I talked about the last time a little bit, was the Nordstrom concept, and I put them at the top of a pyramid of the retail experiments and say, you are, in all ways, you would love all of the capabilities, the best technical ecosystem you have, the most harmonized business processes across the globe, so that as you got to the top of that pyramid and had to talk to an individual, it's the world-class experience. And if all companies were so well organized and technology was so well implemented, and nobody ever bought somebody and had to integrate them, then that would be utopia. We'd all love it. That isn't the real world. What's the real world is we launch business lines with very short technical needs and try to see if it has stickiness in the markets, and then we add to it as we go, but we never really round out or add to it. We just sort of do what we need to do to keep the engine running. So there's always complexity in everything. The humans in the loop are likely going to be there. The more we continue to refine that and use assistive tech, whether AI or data or any other omni-channel experience, voice translation, dialect removal, it's still at the end of the day, I think, an experience where if you have the best people doing CX in a living, you're going to get more of that business. And the only metric I'd leave that with is today the market's about 123 billion, of which only 20% of it's outsourced. If I just maybe Max and I would like maybe, I don't know, 10% more of that market would be making a lot of us in this industry happy, which I think is what will happen, right? More of it will become, are you better at doing this for me than I might be doing it for myself? Or I would like more of my people inside the company to be the Nordstrom people, and I want more of you to be these. That's fine too. So I think that's the market to be chased. And I don't think it's a and or. I think it's a plus plus in all cases.
You in the middle of your answer, you noted this idea of the best tech ecosystem and developing that. And I know as you think about the development of ecosystems, a portion of what you're doing is actually investing in a number of startups in this space as well.
Mm.
And I wonder, what do you look for in companies that you invest in, and to what extent are you thinking about those investments in the balance between potential great returns for the organization as those companies succeed, and or the possibility of actually becoming the acquirer of those businesses eventually?
Great question. And I would love to say I have every answer here. We figured it all out. But if I did, I probably would be retired and you'd see a palm tree behind me. But the way Max and I think about this, and I have to include our chairman, Andy Lee. So what we have is a fortunate model where Max and I are running this company, and we've been humbled by the fact we've got 100,000 people globally that look at us every day to strategize and figure out where this should go. At the same time, there's a little bit of worrisome around where is this world going in terms of where it is. So how do we get ahead of that? Well, we invest in it. So Andy has a firm in Kyra, which is a VC firm. He's also got relationships with two other major VC firms. I have a relationship with some of the ex-Cognizant folks that run one of the larger VC firms as well. And what we've created is an ecosystem where early stage investments can help fuel our engine. And then how we think of that portfolio is how do we be complementary in our journey, given we're focused, and I repeat all over again, we're a CX company that digitally enables it. But how does that lens get applied to those layers of technology? And then how do we help enable that ecosystem for those early players to be a proving ground, a test ground, but also bring that to clients and say, here's some things that are, quite frankly, emerging. But we would like to show you the emergence of this as you think of these journeys, and see if they're helpful. And if they're proven, i.e., they're tested and they're there, then we an enabler of that ecosystem. So that is our philosophy. We have invested directly in a few that we feel are very complementary. The first is really around the ability for noise cancellation to be free. In our industry, much like in this discussion, background should never be a problem. That technology in itself, we invested in, and it's being perfected as we get more and more up that stack. The second is in dialect removal. How do we make sure that the client has the best experience should they choose to want to use this technology in certain areas? And it also helps very remote locations in the world be a labor pool for us. We're very big on investing in our people and funding our people in our foundation. So we use those as a way to enable geographic areas in the market labor pool that we could pull in that would be helpful or assistive. And then the real next big of investment was in the ability to do translation. I'm a big, in my headset of strategy and basis of voice. I think technology one day will remove the barriers of having phone calls between nations. It will be embedded in switches. It'll be embedded in applications. It'll be embedded in cell phones. If you've seen Samsung, they've already done it. Where you're having a conversation, like I said earlier, on one end, and you might be in Slovak or Russian or Spanglish on one side and this side of the other is receiving English or Italian. That is today's tech. I mean, it's perfected, it's real. And more of that is just about getting the nuances by vertical industry. So how do we put healthcare things there about acronyms in tech, or how do we look at if you're in some of our retail or our entertainment spaces, gaming and or NASCAR, how do we put those words in that people would understand when you're talking about lap times or anything that's kind of nuanced, but pure language is there today. So that piece we've invested heavily in, partly to enable our global strategy, but also I think clients are starting to realize if this is really where the world will go, and I always say to clients, there's always being at the bleeding edge and the leading edge and then the edge. And I would love for them to listen to me right now at the bleeding edge and try some things. No production's fine. When we get to the next level of that edge, it's going to start to become a realization. Don't miss the opportunity to make that pilot something more invasive, because eventually it's going to be embedded everywhere and we're going to have to figure out how to use it. So that's a place we're very excited about. And then the last piece is really our analytics and thematics. We're data guys. If you think about what we do in the billions of transactions we do a year for our clients, we have more insights than anyone else in the world about what we could do differently to make that world better. We should turn those insights into, in effect, assets. And we've started to do that for clients now, where we can start to think about thematic, patterns around order tracking, order fulfillment, reservation matching, sentiment back into reservation matching and hit rates. And then how do we start to drive a revenue engine, which is really what we care about, is the business side, right? If you're not doing something that enables a business problem to be solved and or to be grown as a company, meaning revenue, the technology is not worth it. Don't even have the discussion.
Yeah. You reference clients numerous times in your response, and I know that your client set includes chief customer officers or chief revenue officers, depending on how it's framed in an organization, chief operating officers, chief digital officers. You very specifically have held the first, the second and third roles. You've had many aspects of the first role as well, and I wonder how useful has it been to be able to speak as a former peer to clients and customers in many cases.
I actually had this discussion with Max in the coffee yesterday on the way back to the airport. It's a compliment to me to be able to sit there and say, well, as a CIO who's listening to all this AI stuff, the first thing I'm thinking about is how do I get the skills to be competitive in this area so that all the consultants that are about to invade my company have someone to talk to that can keep up with them and know we're being told, part of it is the truth, and two, it can be done. So I was always thinking as a CIO, you always had to be leading the edge, and you relied on consultants as partners, but you also were a bit skeptical. As a chief digital officer, you wanted all the ideas, so you're like, tell me what's going on. I want to sponge and I want to get the best of them because I'm going to pick my spots where I invest. And in the business side, owning the P&L, you really, here's the dynamic that Max and I were talking about yesterday. You really don't care how it happens. You just want it to happen, right? So you have all these people who care about the widgets and how they're orchestrated and how they're glued together, and and can be done in the timeline. Is it enterprise and scale ready? And yes, there are lots of people, and I was one of them or two of them, who should worry about this. But then when it gets to the business level, it's like, this is my problem. I don't care how you solve it, just solve it, right? So all the effort that went in seems so monumental, and at the end, please just solve this problem. It's an asset to me to have had those skills and to have them, but I also feel for the people on the other side of the table, because I kind of know, like, oh boy, here we go. This is another consultant speak per se around these things, and I'm like, no, we're going to be real. We're going to try to do stuff that matters. But it's a luxury for me for sure, but it's also quite fun.
That's super interesting. We've already talked about a number of salient trends to a business like yours. You've talked about the progression from RPA to machine learning, AI, generative AI. You've talked about other aspects of customer experience and the trends associated with those as well. Anything else as you look to the future, Mike, that has you particularly excited, whether a tech trend or a business trend or a skill trend, whatever the case may be?
I think there's a bit of a spectrum that this AI world started 6 or 8 years ago that I still hasn't gotten to the full maturity yet. That I actually was lucky enough to spend a little time on 5 or 6 years ago. That I still think when it gets there will be will be the thing that matters. The trend I'm watching and the trend that I'm most interested in is the reason companies aren't adopting AI at scale in production is there's still a level of compliance, risk, and security that has to be thought through. We're talking extensive models and testing and whether the validity of the answer is correct today. That's just data infusion into AI today. But that's, I think, sort of step one. There's sort of a secondary step of when the model becomes smart enough and the bounds and extents are tested, then I feel good enough for production so it can handle my chatbot or my AI assist or my virtual human or meta-human. But then there's a sort of secondary piece of this where, and years ago, 5, 7 years ago, it was called robots as a service. There's still an industry out there that lives there. But there's this sort of brain that orchestrates a number of transactions, and the AI become a layer of these bots that go out and do their work and come back and report back that things are done. And it could be just automations of systems and integration. And then there's sort of another layer where RPA became the thing, which was a model and a process together, right? So I think the convergence that happens to make this industry really what it would be, and version 4 got us a little bit of integration on where GBT went on version 4. But really where I think it's going to be quite interesting is when you start the orchestration and process, you can then handle the audit issues. When you can know audit to task and you know what a machine does, now I can start to look at that audit down to a process level. Now I start to pass the hurdles of internal adoption quite rapidly. And then when I get to the next level, which is sort of the neural network level, where the brain isn't just a brain, it's a level of nested processes that start to think about orchestrating many complex things. Now a company gets to a level of what would be today's compliance, risk, and audit practice around things to get things done, whether financial processes or X, doesn't matter. I think that convergence is when the world explodes, and this could be adopted in mass scale. And I still think we're early. We're still teaching models. We're still testing extents. We're still looking at validity. We're tagging images. We're labeling things. We're early, but I think that convergence of that process hierarchy, network hierarchy, orchestration layer, it then becomes what is tomorrow. And I think we have to think that way in our CX journey. I think everyone has to think that way in their systems orchestrations. And I think that will be where cloud, process, and sort of AI become it. And I think the big players figured it out. Now they're trying to figure out how to put it all together in kind of a common system, or enable their system to do it as sort of step one. But I think that's where it will go. That stuff I love reading about. I love learning about and poking around to see where it could possibly go for us.
Speaking of reading and learning, I wonder if there's anything you've recently read or watched or listened to that you particularly recommend to our audience.
Yeah, so I'm a voracious data ingesting guy. I love to read. I read like half of a book and then I start reading another half of another book. So I probably have like 6 books in play at any time, and partly the ADD piece kicks in. But the one book I finished was CEO Excellence, which was 3 McKinsey partners wrote. And when I was told this is the job we'd like you and Max to do, the first thing I always do is turn to where can I ingest large amounts of data to put a plan together, put my head around the right kind of thinking, and I just have to reshape my head around this new task in there. So that's been something. It's three McKinsey books. I like that book. It was very short, very crisp, but it had a lot of great examples of just dimensional thinking, how problems were broken down, what really you need to do for your company to set the right path. But I'm also a history buff. So if there's a book by Ron Chernow called Titans, which the Rockefeller world, or if it was in Churchill's world, I love the world around Churchill in terms of what he thought and strategy. So those are the ones I ingest quite a bit, in addition to watching all of your podcasts.
Checks in the mail, Mike. Well, Mike Clifton, thank you so much for taking a little time with me yet again, and congratulations again on your ascent to the co-CEO role of Alorica. Thanks so much for sharing a bit about what's exciting you in this role, the various aspects of your career that have led to it, and the variety of insights you shared through this conversation. I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you having me. I thank you so much, Peter.